Daniel never believed in Santa Claus. Not since that Christmas night 20 years ago. He was just a boy, determined to stay awake and catch a glimpse of the man in red. But instead of sleigh bells on the roof, he heard screaming, a sound that echoed through the house, sharp and terrified, before being abruptly cut short. Then, silence. Memory is a funny thing, though. It fades. Guilt, however, settles in. It becomes routine. Now, at 34, Daniel was alone in his small apartment on Christmas Eve. The flickering lights of a cheap plastic tree did little to lift the gloom. A half-empty bottle of even cheaper whiskey sat on the coffee table beside his phone, its screen lit with messages he had no intention of replying to. He took a long swallow, the liquor burning a familiar path down his throat. That's when the sound began. It wasn't from the street below or the roof above. It was a slow, deliberate jingle of bells, echoing from inside the walls. It sounded like it was coming from the very structure of the building, moving through the bones of the house itself. Daniel froze, the glass halfway to his lips. He strained his ears, telling himself it was just the old pipes, the neighbors, anything but what he knew it was. The jingling grew closer, a steady, rhythmic procession moving through the hollow spaces around him. Then, at exactly 1 minute past midnight, the power went out. The apartment was plunged into an oppressive darkness, broken only by the faint glow of the city outside his window. A thick silence followed, so profound that Daniel could hear the frantic beat of his own heart. And with the silence came the smell. It was a vile cocktail of damp fur, rusted metal, and something cloyingly sweet, like fruit left to rot for far too long. A forgotten memory surfaced, a whisper from his mother from a lifetime ago, on a Christmas just before she disappeared one cold winter night. "Santa's not for those who are awake," she had said, her voice thin and urgent. But Daniel was awake now. Very awake. Thump, thump, thump. Heavy boots were crossing the hallway, just outside his locked door. The sound was muffled by the carpet, but each step was heavy, deliberate. Daniel held his breath. He could see wet footprints beginning to soak through the cheap rug under his door, dark patches spreading in the dim light. A deep voice began to hum, a broken Christmas carol. The notes were all wrong, stretched out and discordant, a melody of pure dread. A shadow slid beneath the door. It was tall and unnaturally wide, the outline unmistakable. Daniel scrambled backward, his chair scraping against the floor. He fumbled for his phone, but his hands were shaking too violently to unlock it. Click. The lock on his door turned by itself. The heavy deadbolt slid open with a sickeningly smooth sound. The door swung inward without a sound, revealing the figure standing there. Santa. He was impossibly large, his bulk filling the entire doorway. His red suit was torn and stained with something dark and slick. The white fur trim was matted and grimy. His beard wasn't a cascade of pure white snow, but a tangled, filthy mess, clotted with a sticky, dark substance. His eyes were the worst part. They were sunken and glassy, like old Christmas ornaments left too long in the freezing cold, reflecting the dim city light with a dead, hollow sheen. In one hand, he held a massive burlap sack. It wasn't still. It twitched and writhed, and from within it came the faintest of whispers. Santa spoke, but his mouth didn't move. The voice echoed directly inside Daniel's head, cold and ancient. Children sleep because they are innocent. Adults stay awake because guilt keeps them alert. And guilt is always on the list. As Santa stepped into the room, the temperature plummeted. Frost began to creep across the windows, intricate patterns of ice blooming in the dark. The memories Daniel had suppressed for 2 decades flooded back with unbearable clarity. The night he hid in the closet, hands clamped over his ears, while his younger sister cried for help from her bedroom down the hall. The night he chose his own safety, his own silence, over consequence. The night she disappeared. Santa reached into his sack. His movements were slow, almost graceful. He pulled out an object, not wrapped in festive paper, but in what looked disturbingly like stretched, pale flesh, tied with a sinewy cord. It was a doll. Her doll. He pulled out another, a small, worn teddy bear with one button eye. Hers. Then a music box. its paint chipped and faded. Hers. Gifts are not rewards. The voice in Daniel's head explained calmly, they are reminders. Panic finally broke through Daniel's paralysis. He tried to run, to scramble for the window, the fire escape, anywhere. But as he pushed himself up, the floorboards beneath him groaned and bent inward, like the ribs of a great beast caving under pressure. The warped wood trapped his feet, forcing him back down to his knees. Senta stood over him, a monstrous, silent silhouette. He reached out with two gloved fingers and pressed them gently beneath Daniel's eyelids, prying them open. The touch was colder than ice. Adults must watch what they helped create, the voice whispered. A final, chilling decree. The bells began to ring again, louder and louder, a frantic, deafening cacophony inside the room, inside his skull. The sack at Santa's feet opened wider, a gaping maw of shadow, and from the darkness, more shadows spilled out. Crawling things with no discernible shape, slithering across the floor, moving toward him. The next morning, after neighbors complained of a single, horrifying scream that stopped far too suddenly, the police arrived. They had to force the door, its frame warped and frosted over. Inside the frozen apartment, they found Daniel. He was sitting upright in his chair, his eyes stretched impossibly wide and unblinking, fixed on something no one else could see. His mouth was locked open in a silent, eternal scream. The cheap plastic Christmas tree glowed softly beside him, its lights the only warmth in the room, and beneath its branches lay a single, small gift tag. On it, written in uneven, spidery red ink that looked suspiciously like dried blood, were three simple words. You stayed awake. And somewhere, deep inside the walls of the old building, the faint jingle of bells could be heard, moving on to the next house. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next descent into the dark. Stay safe.